by his definition, and I agree with him, anything that follows one of these anti-pattern that are very Drupal-like. So for example, settings, hidden, 4 clicks away, you have to know your way inside of Drupal, and if you don't, then that's too bad. You'll never find the option that could save you a whole day of development. Then when you've done your custom module, you realize, oh, it was already there, I just didn't know where. So that's been a problem for a long time. It's getting better, but it's, yeah, legacy, you know. Or this amazing interface that is actually old purpose, and then it's not custom for anything, so you receive whatever. They can send you any type of data, and you will display it on this interface. So now we're in the era of strict typing. We don't like that. For example, also we have these verbose help texts, because of course the interface is not custom, so it's supposed to work with any type of data that you send. Then you need to write these boring long help text because nobody understands what's happening. So that's still not helping a lot. And you get lost very, very easily. And then, yeah, we have lots of help texts. Sometimes they're just describing exactly what the title says. Thank you. We don't need that. It's pretty much like these compulsory commentary in code. We're getting rid of those, I hope someday, but not yet. So, another part of Drupalisms are hooks. Drupal is based on hooks. That's the main pattern that we use. It's very powerful, but it's also weirdly done. Let's say it that way. So usually you get these hooks, which are powerful and awesome, and then you receive any type of data within it, and then you just have to write a ton of custom code to handle all these cases. And then you get giant objects like arrays. If you've ever heard anything about Drupal, probably that would be array hell. And that's true, because it's been working with arrays of arrays of arrays, and that's not comfortable, to be honest. Then you receive variables that has lots of possible values for operations, and then depending on this value, you can have a lot of things happening, and then you got this spaghetti code everywhere, and you are forced to write spaghetti code because you have to follow the standard. So that was something. I learned everything I know about PHP on Drupal 7, so that gives you a good idea of how much time it took me to level up on skills. But that's a bit specific, so let's go for something more generic. A Drupalism is something bad, let's just say it that way. Old practices, legacy code that you want to get rid of. And also, that's an exclamation, oh no, that's a Drupalism, never do that. Never do that. Especially if you're coming from Drupal and then you go on a Symfony project, you will have bad habits, I'm telling you. So that's the past, okay. We won't talk about what makes Drupal Drupal. So the concepts, like how it works. This is the kind of Drupalisms that are just opinionated way the CMS works. We're not talking about that. That's just what makes Drupal Drupal, right? We're not going to talk about design choices, because we know those are a big subject. And we're not talking about the reasons behind the changes, because as a community, it's really much a complicated relationships. People have different views. Sometimes it works. Sometimes there's issues open for 10 years and still no resolutions. It happens. That's community work for you. So we're not talking about every single Drupalism. It makes no sense, and we only have 45 minutes, so you don't want to stay here with me all day. And then what we will talk about is all these specific practices that we are moving away from. That's the point, you know, the tools that we actually use as a community, and just the most significant changes, because otherwise it's going to take forever. I could write a book on this. So let's see some practical examples of how it was in the days of yore. So community tools, there was one website to rule them all, that's Drupal.org, big surprise here. And on there, you can do everything. So you have a custom issue system built in, using Drupal obviously. So if you wanted to open an issue, you had to register on Drupal.org, create a profile, everything. It was not easy to do. It was not very user-friendly, let's say. Then we had our own CVS repository, then we moved to a self-hosted Git repository, and we're still very much in our own bubble, doing our own stuff and not being like friendly to newcomers. Getting inside the community was very taxing because you had to know a lot of things, where to find stuff, and just everything was through Drupal.org. Then obviously we had a custom CI because we had custom everything, so why not? So we needed that to run tests, and it took an hour at least to run these tests. That was not efficient. It was a lot of work to maintain. And we do like recognition in the community, so we have a credit system, and it was built on Drupal.org again, based on the authors of the commits. So all this custom stuff, which worked very well, but is, again, just a community being inside its own bubble and not being friendly to other people and the way that other communities actually work, especially nowadays. And we had a custom naming convention, because why not? Don't you like custom stuff? So that's how it works. The API compatibility dash major dot minor version, then possibly if you're at RC, you know. So giving you an example, that would be the version for a custom module, for example, which is really not that clear when I look back on it. To me it was normal, but then I discovered the rest of the world and I was like, oh, this is much better actually. So yeah, a lot of custom everywhere. Then local dev was pretty much the same. There was a client, which is long dead, by the way. Don't try to look at it. It's gone. So Acquia Dev Desktop. If you don't know, Acquia is the company built by the founder of Drupal. So it's, of course, working a lot with Drupal. Then there was a documentation to help you set up your local environment, but nothing really official apart from that client. And we used heavily patches, Git patches, and interdiff files to actually share with others our solutions. So you would have an issue queue with tens of comments and people just sharing their patches, and you would try every patch file until one worked for you, and then you would send it back to the community saying, oh, this worked for me on that and that environment. And patches are not the best way to do that nowadays, of course. So I will show you how it's done, of course. Lots of custom files as well. I feel like custom is the word, like every time I say custom drink, then it needs to be a short day for you. But yeah, disguised PHP files, because why not? So we have .info files that was used to declare your custom modules or themes. Then you had .module files, obviously, because where do you put your module code otherwise? And then we had my favorite, the inc files, because you would end up with modules thousands of lines long, because you're using hooks, remember? So that's pretty verbose. And then, so you would include files to just separate a little bit, because we're not that messy. And then with reserved names, of course, like admin, pages, etc. And all of these, of course, is not OOP. You know? So that's Drupal for you before Drupal 8. Install files as well. It's still PHP, but still not .php files. So just all these conventions making it very, very hard to get into it and to contribute. Then we had a theming system with more PHP files. So .tpl.php files, that was our template, custom template files. And then, of course, you could have executable PHP code in the theme files, because why not? You know, we like to execute PHP everywhere. We had raw value by default, unless you use a custom API to sanitize those, so not very safe, not very friendly for our friends doing the front end, obviously. But you could retrieve any type of data with preprocess functions, and that's how we ended up with websites all in the templates. Like, all the logic was done in these files because it was easy, it was just there. So before displaying the data, you would just retrieve it in these PHP files. That was extremely messy. Even for Drupal, that was a bad practice, but people did it anyway because it was convenient and it allowed you to do it. So you don't want to see that code nowadays, honestly. I'm ashamed. We had coding conventions from a long time ago with this underscore on private functions, you know, coming from legacy stuff. So that's pretty recent, actually. I started my career on this, so it's pretty amazing how far we've come, actually. But yeah, procedural code, just to sum it up. It was a mess. Then on the config part, it was still the same. Custom stuff, no native configuration system, where you had to add a custom module that was called features. And if anyone has ever used features here, you know it was bad. It was a pain in the ass. I'm telling you, it was really hard because you had to select every single configuration you wanted to export, bundle them up in a module, and that was, of course, more PHP code being generated. And then every time something changed, you had to update everything. It was a mess. But it was the only thing that we had, so we worked with it. Tests, that was hard to do. Just simple tests and PHP unit tests, that was the only thing available. There was no, yeah, you could do Behat tests, but that was not pretty advanced, not very well supported. And of course, there was no test for JavaScript. I mean, we need those. Custom routing system, just a big array. Remember the array hell? There you have it. That's routing for you. Of course, packaging system, the same. Yay, make files, thank you very much for existing. And then we would build these with Drush, so the custom Drupal bash CLI. So just, it was a lot of everything, pretty random, pretty custom. For JavaScript, we used behaviors. So if you've ever seen those, it's hard to manipulate. You never know which is executed first, and it looks like that. Just, I don't need to comment on this, I think. Even though you're mainly PHP people, I think you understand that this is not a modern way to do JavaScript. And hooks, because I told you about hooks. So this is actually it's pretty comfortable, to be honest. You can execute code wherever you want. You know it's going to be executed before that and this. So hooks in itself are not that bad, but it's just only hooks, all of them, everywhere. And so, for example, these are the most famous ones. There are people who are very attached to them, and they don't want to see them go because it's part of the Drupal experience. I particularly love the hook update n, where you replace n with a number, and then it gets executed only once. And then if you have forgotten bit of update you want to do to your database, then you have to increment and create another function and just execute it again. And let's get rid of this one. But yeah, hooks everywhere. Almost as much as array, they just define the Drupal experience. But luckily, Drupal is evolving. It's been evolving for a while. So if you've been trying Drupal before 8, that was your experience, and I understand why you don't like it. But fear not, things are changing for the better. So if we're coming back to community tools, there's still Drupal.org, obviously. There are still issues and credit there. but actually we're moving away from it. We are trying to implement new tools, and for example, there's a new Git infrastructure. So we've been moving to a GitLab infrastructure, which is more standard. Everybody has a GitLab account. It's easy to contribute. So it was a lot of work. So you can see it started in 2014. Some of these are actually still happening. For example, the better issue queue research is still happening as we talk, because it's a lot of work to try things. Moving away from a custom infrastructure is not easily done. And as we are talking, there are only 2 or 3 people full-time being paid to work on Drupal.org infrastructure. It's a huge, huge undertaking. So it's taking a lot of time, especially with community work, because there's like MVPs trying a lot of stuff. So we ended up working with GitLab, because that was our most, I would say, practical way forward. And so what's happening? So currently, we have replaced all our custom Git hosted instance with GitLab, so that is done. Then we're introducing GitLab features, so as of now, you can open PRs or MRs if we're talking GitLab. And so by patches, now if you see an issue and you want to contribute, you have a button and you just open a new PR, just like normal people do. You can also, we call that issue forks, because you're in the issue and you can directly open a PR with just a single button, so that's how it was called in the community. So I'm giving you a lot of QR codes if you want to watch the issue queues later. Lots of reading for you. But so now that's how it looks. So you're here, you would be on an issue, and you can have all these tests that are explaining to you what's happening. You can have live previews with Tugboat, so that's pretty convenient. Actually, it will build from your own branch, pretty comfortable. And then here you have like the issue fork. You can clone people's branches. Like, it's just very normal things, but within the Drupal ecosystem and Drupal.org. So people from the community are not too lost, and newcomers are less lost. Of course, this is not the definitive look of it. We're still moving from Drupal.org for issue queues, but it's a long time coming, and it's still a lot of work. It's going to also replace our own CI, obviously. So we're currently testing out the alpha of the GitLab CI, much more efficient. It's just day and night. And so this is happening at the moment. So people with custom modules can actually opt in to test the alpha, and it's going to be available for everybody, hopefully in next month or so. So pretty much everything Git is moving to GitLab, which is causing a lot of issues, because obviously issues are still on Drupal.org for now, and the entire credit system relies on these. So if you're moving the issues directly to GitLab, of course it's more convenient, but then you have to rebuild the credit system. How do you keep the current credit? It's not that easy to do, and it's not finished. But aside from GitLab, we've also been moving from our custom naming convention. So now standard will just using the old modules. They keep their old names, obviously, but the new ones starting Drupal 8, it's all Semver. So that's making a lot more sense. Of course, it will be weird for people coming, like, why is this module 7 dot da 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 and the new version is 1 dot da da da? That's life, you know. Yeah, as long as you're installing a recent version, you will never see these old ones. So who cares, right? It's still much better and much more standard. Everybody can understand Semver, so yay. Of course, for local dev now we have an official tool which is ddev. It's really easy to set up. It's just a wrapper around Docker pretty much, so it makes sure to not mess with your other Docker installs. It's just an isolation, and it's fully customizable, of course. And it's compatible with all the Drupal tools. You can install Drupal with a single line of code on your CLI, so that's much better. Of course, it's also working with other. You can use Drupal with Lando or whatever you're used to, but now we have an official tool and the preferred way of doing it. And also, by the way, Randy Fay is working with me, and I love it. So it's really cool to be able to work with open source maintainers on this, because then you know your money is paying for something good for everybody. So I'm very proud of this. Also, now you have Drupal pods. So if you know Git pods, it's Git pods, but with Drupal. So it's just a browser extension that allows you to have a full live environment. You have website preview, you have the IDE, and the CLI, obviously. So that's great, especially when you're doing contribution sprints. Maybe you have your work laptop, you cannot install a new version of Docker or PHP or whatever. You do it in the browser, and you can just test it out, and it's really convenient. So this is all thanks to moving to GitLab, obviously. And now it's much easier for like training people, contribution, when you don't have a lot of time and you don't want to spend 2 hours on your setup. Yay! So Git pods are very cool. That's how it looks. So I think if you've ever used Git pods, there's nothing new here, just IDE, CLI, and the preview of a website that you can open in a full window. Nothing very new there. Then, of course, we moved away from downloading files. Now we use Composer like adults. Yay! So you just have Drupal on packages. You have all the modules there, all the themes, and you just require them. And it's very easy to do. We also have a dedicated endpoint for edge case, especially if you're working on porting your module and then you cannot install it because it's not compatible. So now you have a dedicated endpoint that tells you to be lenient, and then you can install it and try it on. So it just looks like that. When you go on a module page, you directly have the install one-liner. Pretty standard, easy to do. You know you have your lock file, and you can version it and share it, and that's just modern life, you know. Very comfortable. So we're using 2.3.6, I think, at the moment, with the latest Drupal version. So we are not late to the party. We're using the current versions, and even the betas are compatible most of the time. So that's pretty efficient as well, because Drupal 9 was still on Composer 1, and switching to Composer 2 is just a massive gain of performance, so that's very comfortable. And if you're using like dedicated hosted or platforms that allow you to just push the log file and they will build it for you, it's a pretty standard way of doing it, so that's cool. Symfony, of course, I mean, like I told you, it's the basis of Drupal now, so it's Symfony 6 for now. Actually, it's 6.2 if you want to use PHP 8.2. And we are just integrating more and more components and best practices, pretty much. So we still have some differing standards when it comes to like indentation or stuff like that. There are some legacy, some habits in the community that are a bit different from how Symfony does things, and not every Symfony component is integrated in Drupal, but more and more. So it's still, if you're coming from Symfony, it will make it much easier to learn all the Drupal stuff, because you already know where to find the files, obviously. And if you're coming from Drupal, then you learn a useful skill. It was not easy, but seriously, it made the whole community more professional, obviously. Of course, all the things Symfony, the config files are now now YAML. Everything is YAML, so that's pretty standard, easy to do. Everybody knows how it works. Routes, services, plugins, dependency injections. I mean, you get it. PSR4, folder structure. I mean, all of this is just new because of Symfony. So we just got rid of a lot of legacy and weird ways of doing stuff when we switched to Symfony. Event subscribers are replacing hooks more and more, but not all of them yet, but it's getting this way. So this is a much more standard way of doing things in PHP, obviously, much more comfortable. Twig, of course, there was no need to have a custom template system when you have Twig, thanks to Symfony again. So that's pretty standard. And filtered values, you can have your own custom Twig filters, you know that. That's just no reason to have PHP in your theme anymore. So that's pretty comfortable, actually. All the info files are now YAML files. Again, just standardizing everything. So the module files are still there. Sorry. But most of the time, they're not mandatory. You don't really need them unless you want to do like hooks, obviously. But what we see more and more now is class resolver service to just, okay, you declare your hook in the .module file, and then you put your class somewhere else where you can test it, where you can do all the things you need to do in an OOP way. So usually now the .module files are really short, but it's still a legacy that we have not gotten rid of it yet. So it's bittersweet, but yeah. More specific files, the ink files. Bye ink files. These are completely gone, except of course in Drupal core, because you're never doing things right for yourself. But it's disappearing. It's just a question of time and how many people can contribute. So if you want to get rid of legacy code, we need you. Install files are still around. That's one piece that has not moved on yet, but we're hoping it will just disappear in a few years. Yeah, I'm not very optimistic on how much time it takes. JavaScript behaviors are still there as well, but the API behind it is much, much better. And we actually have tried to get rid of jQuery for a long time, and we still can't. But they've released security updates, and so we're working with this community as well to make sure that it's safe. So it's not the best front-end experience if you're not decoupling, but it's getting better, and that's the most important thing, especially since we can now test with PHP unit by default. The core has its own test suites, and you are required to provide tests when you contribute modules. So this is getting, again, more and more solid. You can do a lot of different tests, especially now JavaScript tests. And we needed those, again, very important. And also, you can now use Cypress as well as Behat. I mean, all the standard stuff you can use. It's, again, just a question of what you're used to. Of course, next, configuration files. Now we have entities, and we have a built-in system with YAML files again. And it's a monolithic configuration repository, so you can just export everything at once, import everything at once, and be done with it. It will write YAML files, no more PHP, and it's built in the core, so you don't have to worry about having extra modules. Obviously, if you want to have different configs for different environments, let's say you have specific for local, and they are different from prod, then you have, of course, a module that does that. It's to split the configs, and then you can export things based on all of these patterns that you need. And you can use Drush to just do this export for you, so it's easy to add in your pipeline in whatever you use. So yeah, night and day. If you, again, features, bad memory, it's gone. It's gone. So what about hooks? Like I told you, most of them have been replaced by event subscribers, but not all of them. Sometimes it's very hard to replace them. We have very specific habits. So we can use the class resolver, like I told you, to just deport the code in a proper class. And we have a module that is called Hook Event Dispatcher to help that. With that module, you can pretty much eliminate practically all the hooks. So again, it's not within core yet, but it's getting there. And code quality. Yay, Code Sniffer. We like this one. It's not new by any means, but it's getting better and better integrated. And obviously now we have PHP Stan. The maintainer, Matt Glaman, is actually working on a custom Drupal set of rules, so it's much easier. Again, put it in your C-Hive, forget about it. It's a beautiful day. Release cycles, we are now following, of course, Symfony release cycles. So it's predictable. Before that, it was just, when things were ready. Now I can tell you for sure that in 2 years there's going to be Drupal 11, because that's how it works. So a minor Drupal release is happening every, like 1 month after every single Symfony minor release. So we're keeping up with them very closely, and the Drupal security team actually has people from the Symfony security team as well. So for example, we know that we can stay on Symfony 6 for good, until 2027, because we have people there that can release versions that are non-LTS for us, so we don't have to move away from Symfony 6 too soon. So that's really cool that we can work hand in hand with them. Very important. And we have a new security release every Wednesday, and once a month it's a core security release. So that's like the Drupal security team is 30 people, more or less, and they're doing a massive work to keep Drupal safe. That's actually one of the most important thing about Drupal, I think, how much care we put on safety and security. If you want to contribute code, you have to apply for a specific role that shows that you can produce quality code and safe code, and it will be reviewed by volunteers to make sure that we don't let any type of code be published as contributed module that people install. So it's, when you see that a module is covered by the security policy, that's what it means. That's pretty important. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but you can see that the release cycles are getting shorter because now we are following the Symfony pattern, so very predictable. Quick fact, Drupal 8 is end of life, like for a year, like November 2021, but Drupal 7 is not, because moving away from Drupal 7 is really hard, because it's such a different structure, right? So the migration is actually very costly. People don't have the money, and lots of companies have been, reluctant to go to Drupal 8 and more. So we're still supporting Drupal 7 until the end of this year, November. It might get extended again, depending on how many websites have actually moved away from it. But now I think half the Drupal websites in the world are still running on Drupal 7. So it was just a security issue that we keep maintaining it. But just so you know, people are still working and developing things in Drupal 7. It's fully PHP 8 compatible and stuff like that. So you get some of the goodies back to Drupal 7, but it will still be this experience that I've talked about earlier. So it's good for people with, let's say, their own practical skills, but not developers. If you're looking for a professional experience, of course, you will not go to Drupal 7. And so, Drupal 10 was just released in December, like I said, so we're good for 2 years until Drupal 11. Upgrades are now much easier to do. Once you've just installed Drupal 8, going up is actually just like updating for a minor version, because you got the deprecation Like for every minor version, you will have the information that some elements are deprecated, so it's easy to just take care of it bit by bit as it comes. And there's a module upgrade status to help you identify all the incompatibility issues. So lots of automation with Rector. There's a Drupal Rector, so it will just create issues for you and suggest the code that you need to apply on. If it cannot do it, obviously, on its own, then it will explain to you what the issue is. So a huge gain of time and effort with these tools. Automation is really awesome. And yeah, so it's very easy to move away from a version once the new is available. The only thing that will make you wait is if the modules, the contributed modules, are ready or not. And that's, for now, 80% of the top 100 modules are Drupal 10 compatible. So it's easier to plan for these, obviously, with all these new tools. People can just take them time beforehand and make sure it works. So that's how it looks. Upgrade status, not very hard to understand what's happening unless you can't see colors, but there's some icons to tell you if it's working or not. And then if you have things to check manually, it will explain to you what exactly is happening, the line, the files. I mean, it's pretty comfortable. New themes. Yeah, because we don't like ugly stuff. So you have the new front-end theme that is called Olivero, and then the new administration theme that is called Claro. So they both ship directly with Drupal now. And so for people who are not from a developer background, it's very important to make their own website in a very small amount of time, because of course one of the problems with Drupal is we don't have a lot of themes, and you usually have to create your own theme, and so that implies a lot of development and custom stuff. So for site builders, it's not the best experience. In the last few years, we've worked a lot on the Drupal developer experience, obviously. But then we removed some stuff from the site builders that are not devs. They just want to click and get it done. And so, of course, now you have Composer. So how do these people actually install Drupal? So we're working now to close the gap with the site builders, make Drupal accessible again, to stay how it was always meant to be, this website that you can use as a professional or as an amateur, and just being the low-code experience that we talked about earlier. And so, speaking of what's coming in the future, the things that we are sure are coming is automatic updates. So like I said, now with Composer, it's really hard for site builders to know how to do stuff, because they need a CLI, they need a terminal. It's not straightforward, it's not a click. So we are actually working on this. Now you can actually click, it will install it via Composer. So you got the best of both worlds. Of course, I'm thinking developers will never use this because we're used to these tools, but for other people, it's perfect because it does things the right way. But on the background, and they don't need to know what's happening. So it's available as a stable module, and it will be in the core for the next release. It was not ready for Drupal 10, exactly. So 10.1, it will be in the core. Much better experience. And in the same vein, we now have the project browser, because currently, if you want to know which module to install, you have to go to Drupal.org, where everything happens, and it's really hard to understand what's the great module doing what, which is the most popular, should I install this or not. So now you will have something within Drupal. If you know WordPress, that's pretty much what they already have for the longest time, but in a different way. So you will see all the available modules that are covered by the security policy of Drupal. You will see the information. You have a system of tags, so you know what it does. And then again, you can install it with a click which was something that was present until Drupal 7 and that we removed, obviously, with Composer. So again, a much better experience for site builders. It's a beta, so it's coming, I guess, next version or the next. So it's still possible to test it if you want to help. Lots of issues have been closed in the last contrib weekend in January, so it's coming along quite nicely. And so that's how it looks for now. So it's pretty cool, I think. It will push all contributors to have like a nice logo and design stuff, but it's much more friendly, obviously, to people who are newcomers or just site builders. Localization is a very important part of Drupal. I don't know if you know, but it's multilingual by design, so that's one of the big strengths of Drupal. But obviously, the localization server is still Drupal 7. Yeah, because Drupal.org is still running on Drupal 7. I forgot to mention, because even for us, it's really hard to migrate. It's such a big website, and it's used every day. For localization, obviously, when you install Drupal, you can install it in any language, and it means that it's using thousands, millions of strings every day on download. So it's not easy to deploy that. So we'll see how it works. I'm part of this initiative, actually. And we're still looking for volunteers, so if you want, we have a meeting every week. So we have to improve this experience as well for people who translate Drupal with a glossary, a better credit system, because people work there, but they never get credit for it. It's really hard to track, because obviously, I told you the credit works with issues. People sometimes just do stuff, they don't open an issue to translate a new string, right? So we need to account for this work better, because it's really about accessibility, really, that you can install a website in your own language. And so we are looking for a way to replace the .po files that are getting like old, obviously, not the best standard nowadays, but it's not very likely to happen based on the discussion that we have. It's just too much work, and it's working fine, actually. It's just not new and shiny. So not sure about where it goes from there, but for now, that's where we are. Again, we had these things called distribution. Like if you wanted to have a magazine, you could have a distribution, and then it would ship Drupal core plus all the modules with some config files to have this new experience right at hand. But they were a nightmare to update, really, really hard to work with. And so we've pretty much abandoned them over the years. But the idea behind it is still very much powerful. And so we realized that that's just a recipe, actually. Again, thanks Symfony. So again, it will be just a Composer template, and it's a work in progress. It's not ready yet, but I'm hoping that during the lifespan of Drupal 10, it will be in core. That's the goal, actually, for the community. This will make a huge difference and a much, much better experience, because, for example, in the European associations, we're trying to share code to all have shiny Drupal websites. It's very hard to do. So when recipes are ready, we can just create this Composer template and just share that, and all benefit from this shared code much more easily. These are not projects that will happen anytime soon, but I thought they were worth mentioning. So more Symfony components, because we always have the questions of, yeah, but you're not using all of Symfony, this bundle exists, why don't you use it? Yeah, why? Because, again, it's just volunteering, so there are other priorities, but for sure this is something that will happen, more and more bundles within Drupal core to make things even more Symfony and just working together cohesively, just not, there's no roadmap there. Again, for hooks, it will happen, but there's no, I cannot say for sure that there will be absolutely no hooks left in a few years. I don't know. It's a lot of work, so still a question. There was a lot of people who wanted to have doctrine actually to replace our old custom ways of doing things, which I understand because it's pretty powerful. But to be honest, it's not likely to happen. Actually, people are very happy with the way things work now, so there's not a lot of pushback from the current community to move away from it. And again, that's a huge undertaking to rewrite everything. So for now, it's still something that some people would like to see, but it's not likely to happen in the next years. And so what's the takeaway from this? Obviously, we've come a long way. A very long way to make this experience much more accessible to developers and site builders alike. There are still Drupalisms. I guess there will always be, because that's just the way we do things, you know. But also, we have a bright future. We have moved into a modern PHP ecosystem. We're using tools that everybody uses. It's easy to adopt. So you will always have to learn things about how Drupal works, what are entities, how you create like content and stuff like that, for sure. But you do that using tools that you already master, so that's much easier to begin with Drupal. It's been very successful adapting. The community behind it is really strong, very opinionated. We work a lot with Symfony, which is obviously a leading framework in the PHP ecosystem. So there are plenty of new things coming. And I think if you haven't given it a look these past few years, maybe you've been missing out. It might not be the right tool for you, but knowing what's out there is just, you know, keeping up with what's happening is important when we work in this field. And so I think it's more, how can I say that? Versatile that people imagine. And of course, you have to learn a lot of things, but it's worth it. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for being here and being interested in this little history lesson. I hope you're not too mad at the code that you saw earlier, but I promise it's much better now. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
No, I killed them. They're too stunned. Well, if you do have questions, yeah.
Okay, question.
Hi, yeah, I started out as a PHP, then Drupal developer. Haven't used it for a while, but my team still does, my company still does. Is there any plans to look at sort of performance at scale? Because that's one of the reasons we stopped using it as a front end and went decoupled. And we still have problems about using it with, we've got a lot of quite experienced developers working on it, but it's quite a lot of effort to get it to horizontally scale, work with spiky traffic loads. Like I'm talking nobody, then 1 million people all piling in.
Well, I can tell you that it can be done because obviously there are Drupal websites with a lot of traffic currently, so it can be done. It's actually been part of the evolution with Symfony and just moving to OOP and just better practices. We have also standardized a lot of things within the code, so performance-wise it's much better than it used to be. Also the core is getting smaller. We're removing unused modules, so Drupal 11 will be 20% less heavy than Drupal 9. So just it's obviously one of the focus of the community performance, because that's obviously what will give us an edge. But a lot of people are using Drupal as is without decoupling, and it's working fine. But I'm guessing that's just, there's a lot of things to know, obviously, on how to optimize. I would say that from Drupal 8, the cache system has been tremendously improved. So it's much finer, you can do a lot of things. And yeah, if you combine it with other tools like, I don't know, like Redis or Varnish or stuff like that, you can get pretty powerful system. So it just depends on how you do stuff, because that's still how you build your content and what type of entities you're using, and that's the age-old question. So how do I do that? But I know a lot of high traffic websites that are pretty successful with Drupal, so
Yeah, like I said, we use it as our primary content management system. I work for a games company,
yeah.
so we get a lot of traffic. I suppose I'd add it to the list of one of the Drupalisms would be database logging. It's always irritated me.
Sorry, could you?
Drupal, add to the list of Drupalisms would be database logging. It seems a really weird opinion to have that, you know, your website has a problem, so it starts writing logs to the database. If the database is the problem, it then just eats itself.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that taken out of core and just use log files or
Don't have logs in
outputs.
production. Yeah, but there's still issues, of course, but even on that front, it's getting better, honestly. Yeah, I'm not a specialist on that subject, so if you have specific questions, as a community, there's always someone to answer on Slack, mainly, and especially for us in the French community, we have a French-speaking Slack, so if you have any more questions, I'm sure I can find people to answer them. I think we are out of time, but maybe one more question?
I think
Do
we've
we
got one
have time?
more, and then
Okay.
yeah, I think everyone's getting hungry.
Hi, yeah, I also started out with Drupal, and I really like it. It's a great CMS and framework. I've noticed with a lot of people I've worked with, they want something like WordPress or something that you can deploy easily, or it's Wix, or this is for site builders or smaller clients, you know, that you typically get, and they want something that's easy to use to update sites visually. And I like Drupal because you don't have a lot of the security. I find it's a lot better, kind of the security maintains on it's a lot better than, say, WordPress, which has a lot of the legacy that you're talking about that Drupal's moved away from, which is great. But I still think there's a lot of work for Drupal to do on the usability of site building, and making it as easy to use as far as WordPress. If they could fill that gap, then they really could.
And that's been actually a work in progress for at least 5 years, because I think at DrupalCon 2018, Dries had a graphic showing the adoption and satisfaction of people depending on the CMS, and you could see that for beginners, Drupal was really hard and they were not satisfied with it, but as soon as they started to master really the ins and outs, they were by far, we were the preferred experience. And so the objective is to make this line flatter at the beginning so that it's more easily adopted. Just like you said, WordPress is very easy to adopt. Then again, it's not the same size of websites and typology of projects. So, but we are very much aware that we have lost a lot of our community, and especially site builders when moving to Symfony. So that's the ideal world, is to make it much better. Yeah. But security-wise, I don't think we can compare Drupal and WordPress. I'm sorry, but anybody can publish any type of WordPress module, extension, plugin, and make people pay for it. You won't see a paid module in Drupal. It's almost never heard of. And so it's just, they make a quick buck, but the code behind it is horrible. We don't have that type of things in the Drupal community, so we have a high bar of expectation, and so that's why things are slow, because we want it to be safe, we want it to be accessible, and that's, you know, that's a lot of work covered by tests, like I said. So good quality takes time. That's the problem. But yeah, as long as we have people sharing about, you know, the new things and the marketing bit of it, just saying, look, it's still beautiful and working fine, I think we can keep up. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much. So yeah, I think it's lunchtime, so we'll be back in here, I think at 1:30 for Rick Kuipers talking about Symfony and rapid application development. But yeah, just another round of applause for Marine.
DrupalCon Europe happening in Lille, so it's really close to you, so you should come. It's in October. This is the mascot. You can take pictures with it because it's really cute, and I took it all the way from France to here, so you should. But yeah, looking forward to seeing you afterwards.